I'm Amy Sheridan. I'm the president of AMAP for a while, but this is actually the first meeting, annual meeting I have presided at for various reasons. And so it's really exciting to see so many people here at this beautiful, beautiful venue. So we have several things to do today, and then you can all get to looking at the wonderful treasures here that Terry will be talking about. First of all, we, on the agenda, I'm just actually jumping to the end for a minute. At the bottom of the agenda is my email. And if you have particular issues or particular things you want us to consider, give me an email, message me. And also, we're going to be, in a few minutes, electing board officers, electing board members, re-electing board members. And we would be really, really excited if some people would like to join the board. The board meets about every 6 weeks or 2 months. It really depends on what's going on. Basically, work on the issues that are going on. And we meet by Zoom because we have people from all over the county. We can't really get together anymore in an easy way because we are spread out, which is the way it should be. So if you would like to be a board member, let me know. And then what we can do is you can meet with the board and we can vote you on until next year's annual meeting. But we would really love to have more participation by people from all over the county. So first thing is, we have, I think, most of the board here. So can each of you introduce yourself? Denise?
I'm Denise Estrada.
And she's from Salinas. So.
And Salvador Munoz from Salinas.
I'm Raymond Neutra from right up the street.
Judy McClellan from Carmel Valley.
Great, great.
And I'm Nancy Runyon from Monterey.
Okay.
Jeff Beckham from Carmel Valley.
So you see, we have people from throughout the area. I actually live 2 blocks from here. I'm from Pacific Grove, so I live like just a block past the barn there, very close to here, closer than Raymond even. So we really would like to get people involved and get your ideas about what the issues are and how this should be addressed. The other thing that I'm afraid I didn't want to leave this till the end. The other thing is that in past years, before COVID, before I even moved here, I know that there were tours, there were particular lectures, things like that. We would be very interested if people are interested in tours. If you tell us some things that you're interested in, if we get enough people, we're willing to set it up. I mean, if you want to go to a certain place, or if we can get like half a dozen people who want to go, then we would be willing to set it up. So that's why I have my email address here, because we want to hear from you. So the next item is we are re-electing 3 of the board members that have agreed to be re-elected, and those are Jeff Beckham, who is our vice president, Sal Munoz, who's right there, and Judy McClellan. So, and we usually have a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. All those opposed? If you're opposed, you have to run.
That's right.
So the next item, the really important one, is the Preservationist of the Year Award, which Jeff will present. And this is really special because of the various things that have happened with COVID. It's been a long time since we were actually had a timely presentation of an award. It took us, 3 years, 4 years to get the last award presented because we just had no way to meet. So, and 1 year it was rained out meeting. So Jeff?
Well, this is going to Raymond Neutra. It's right there. And I'll read the introduction here. for unwavering efforts to preserve and gain recognition for the Richard Neutra designed 1958 Connell House in Pebble Beach, an endangered local historic landmark. This residence was awarded a California State Register of Historic Resources listing and was declared eligible for the National Register of Historic Places until it was torn down and the site scraped a couple of weeks ago. So we struggle with these things, but we do what we can.
There's a lesson from this exercise, and that is the issue of demolition by neglect. And at the board meeting where we opposed this, I suggested that there be a law, sort of a Massey Metaphor memorial law, where it would be illegal for someone to allow what she allowed, where vandals came with a chainsaw and cut through the supports of the house. I've since learned that, in fact, security cameras actually took pictures of who actually did that. It was known.
Wow.
And I suppose that the owner said, no, I'm not going to prosecute. So Supervisor Adams had said she was going to pursue that, but when I follow up with her, I'm sort of pushed off. So it might be that people could write letters to the supervisors saying that this was an issue, what's happening with the possible law against demolition by neglect, and that would be at least one positive thing that might come out of it. And thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that the rest of the world be more successful than I was.
Well, but the main thing is that you did your best for over a decade.
You tried.
Yeah, this was a really long project, way before I moved here.
Yeah, and the other thing was that AMAP paid to have the historical registration, and as a mitigation, Massey had to pay the historian who originally said it wasn't historic to adopt all that language. And if you want to look at it, you can go to neutra.org and works, and under Connell, you can see a link to that extensive document documenting the house, which we didn't want to host. We asked U.S. Modernism to host it, but you can get to it through neutra.org.
Thank you, Raymond.
So the information on the house, one of the requirements, as Raymond indicated, was that it be documented. And there is a website at U.S. Modernist, but also it is in the Library of Congress, on the Library of Congress, with other historic buildings. So it's a really sad ending. It's just amazing because this is really not demolition by neglect. It was,
In the end, it was full demolition, yes.
well, yeah, but we've all seen the people with chainsaws wandering through Pebble Beach, right? Just waiting to vandalize, just waiting to vandalize, you know, that's just the vandals. So anyway.
The engineer,
Right, yeah. So, but I think it's just really great that Raymond is continuing this, and we're, developing ideas for what we can do to prevent this. But there is always the lesson that when you have a lot of money, it's really difficult to fight that. Because she was involved, Massey was the owner who didn't get that. And she fought for years and years in any sort of control of this. So
The one thing that she didn't get that she wanted was that she wanted to build a building that was 4 times the size of the original house. And in the end, she was only allowed to build within the original footprint, and it couldn't be any larger than the original house. Is that
did they put that in there?
yes, yeah, I remember when they
How much
read
you want to
that.
bet that?
I know.
Yeah.
This is the same person who cut down the the giant cypresses along 17 Mile Drive and said, oh, they just made a mistake. They were supposed to trim them. And the upshot of that was that she had to replant tiny little box cypress.
And we'll hopefully
Out
continue.
of the view shed though, where she didn't want to block her view. That was the Board of Supervisors. I think the Board of Supervisors is better than it was though, when I first started working on this, when I didn't have gray hair.
Well, to be honest, at the final hearing in front of the Board of Supervisors, they did not want to vote for what they voted for. They made that really clear. But they had been put in a legal box. They had just come from a closed session with her attorneys. And I think they clearly said in the transcript that they didn't really support this action.
They did.
And when the motion came up about it being the same square footage, I thought I was hearing things, really, because she didn't get at all what she wanted.
Yeah.
She just got rid of the house.
She just wanted to win in some way, so she tore down the house. Anyway,
So,
what's our next step?
oh, so now you get to introduce Terry. Well, I guess we should end the meeting now because you're all going to be having so much fun.
Were we going to talk about any of our issues that we're currently working on?
If you want to, yes.
Very,
We don't
very
have a
briefly.
lot right now.
Very
Go
briefly.
ahead.
Well, one of them is the new proposal for the ATC Hotel that's at the border of Monterey and Pacific Grove in the old American Tin Cannery. This is the third time it's popped it's reared its ugly head. The intention all along was to tear down the historic properties that are there, the last of the large sardine buildings that still remain pretty well intact. And they want to tear those down and build a large hotel, a very large hotel. And so far, we've been able to slow the process down and stop it. But I'm not sure what's going to happen this time. So we may rely on some of you folks to write letters or do something to try and let the PG initially know and then the Coastal Commission know that we're not in favor of this. In particular, from our perspective, it's that we really don't like the idea of them tearing down those buildings that have survived since the 30s, 20s in some cases.
Question, is that document out?
I was told
Their
that,
proposal?
I believe it is now, but I'm not
We
sure.
haven't been notified.
The hearing,
That doesn't
the
mean-
Coastal Commission hearing is not set yet. It could be June though, because that's when they have it listed as Central
So
California.
is this the center of the Coastal Commission?
Mhm,
Yes.
Yes.
So that's,
And are they going to meet in San Diego again for Central Coast?
I've supposedly been waiting for something that was closer. I'm hoping that's true.
Mhm.
so how many of you have heard of the ATC issues? It's sort of, yeah, because it is sort of, local here in PG. There was one thing I got just this week, and I don't know much about it because I haven't read it all, but the Naval Postgraduate School is building a new building. And I think that, as I saw it quickly, one of the alternatives is fine, but the other alternative appears that it would take down some of the historic buildings. So I would be preparing comments on that after I actually read it.
Have you talked to John Sanders?
He's
No.
retired.
Sanders would know.
And this is
He's
the
a hardcore preservationist.
Oh, yeah.
the Naval Postgraduate School takes the place of the old Del Monte Hotel, and it was one of the main subjects of the early meetings of AMAP to try and prevent the demolition of the wings, which we were able to do, and it wasn't easy. So that's always something we're looking at. Among the successes that that AMAP has had includes the Marsh Building, which is the old Chinese antiques building on Lake El Estero. I think you all know, with the big swooping curves. That was intended to be torn down and turned into parking for the church nearby. And then the other one, which I consider a success and other people don't think it's quite as big a success, is the Cooper Valera adobes, which were destined to be pretty much eviscerated. And through dedicated effort of AMAP and others, we were able to hold back a lot of the damage that was done. And so here's our story is, we won against the Catholic Church, the Navy, and that was owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So we've had a good track record here. So with your support, we can do even better. And there's always things coming up like this.
Yeah, and the National Trust is hiring new staff, and so the Cooper Malera will be open again pretty soon. And so I was going to say one other thing I forgot. Are there any questions or comments? Because this is the time that we get to see you, and you get to see us.
I'm going to, oh, go ahead.
I would like to add a comment if I may. I don't know most of you, which is kind of fun. I was one of the founders. I was the driving force. My name is Neil Hotelling, and I was the one who really started getting things together with AMAP to fight the Navy. And that was really the driving force behind bringing all of these organizations together to create a force. And I live in Florida now, so I'm not active anymore. But I'm very elated to see that the group is still up and active more than 20 years later.
20 years, yeah.
And still doing good work.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on the Navy. They can be good neighbors, but they do understand, and the thing to remember with the Navy is any military base, even though it's not designated a historic, because it's a military, United States owned base, it is subject to the National Trust Act.
Right.
So those historic buildings there are subject to the National Trust.
They have 2 historic districts actually.
Yeah. And the other thing I would like to say, based on what I heard earlier, is demolition by neglect is a real problem in this area. And one of the earlier fights that I had as president of the Cannery Row Foundation was the Cannery Row Marketplace saying nothing is historic on this site, we're going to tear it all down. The San Xavier reduction plant is serious demolition by neglect. If it's not stopped soon, we're going to lose that building, which is one of the early cannery buildings still on Cannery Row. And they made great promises, but they didn't follow through. So I don't know what is happening with that segment now. I understand there's some lawsuits between the current owners and the Coastal Commission. But that's a key building to be able to save there, if we can still save it. If it isn't, totally gone.
I'm sorry, which one is that?
It's between
a lot of
El
people know
Torito
it
and the
as
Chart House.
the Stohan building. It's the vacant lot on the ocean side between El Torito and the Chart House. There's really only one building in there.
Oh, okay.
And that was, for years it was a redwood shop, Stohan's, which is why a lot of people know it as the Stohan building. But it was originally the reduction plant for the San Xavier Cannery, which had the big warehouse across the street. They did, what's the term, deconstruct. They had to save, because of the fight, we got them to save the foundation, which has that big boulder in the middle of the cement foundation. They couldn't destroy that, but the city declared it a safety hazard. So they had to deconstruct the building. Theoretically, they were supposed to save a sample of every part of the building so it could be rebuilt, however they designed the new structure. For a few years, those pieces were stored in one of the bunkers up at Fort Ord. My understanding is they're all gone now. Nothing has been saved from San Xavier Warehouse other than the foundation.
I know when I was on the architectural review board here at Pacific Grove, the owners of the American Tin Cannery came before our board wanting to change out all of the original steel sash windows. And what they wanted to replace them with was aluminum storefront, mall-like windows and doors. And we told them, you know, we aren't totally opposed to doing something, but that doesn't seem to fit the historic character of the building. And they said, well, if you don't let us do what we want to do, we're not going to do anything, and see how you like that. And it's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
I said, well, I guess that's what we're going to have. And that's proven to be what it is.
Yeah, it's really an unfortunate situation with the structure. I am not anti-development. I want to see good development, but it needs to be done in conjunction. Particularly, Monterey has a historic master plan and a general plan that call for the preservation of Cannery Row. And specifically, and I fought with the attorney of Monterey at the time, the warehouse that they deconstructed was specifically called out for preservation. The attorney said no, and then like 3 years after it was down, he says, oh, yeah, I guess you were right. But, so it's an uphill fight on preservation, but you guys are doing a good job, and I'm really thrilled to still have you here.
I have a comment that Neo Hoteling has a new archives building in Pebble Beach, thanks to his efforts and Pebble Beach Company.
You want to have our next
Is
meeting
it open
there?
to public?
It's a little small. Yeah, the visitor center at Pebble Beach that they built a few years ago out of a couple of banks, one of the bank vaults is now the home to the Pebble Beach Company.
Oh, that's great.
That's great.
One last thing that I'd like to mention, because it's just come up to be a very worrying issue for me in particular. I'm also the president of the Carmel Art Association right now. And right next to us is what's known as the pit, the giant hole in the ground, which our building is slowly falling into. The wall, our wall that's next to the pit has dropped 2 inches. It's a poured in place concrete wall. And no one wants to take any responsibility, including one of the richest people in the world, Patrice Pasteur. And apparently they're coming forward with their plans to do construction as soon as June. And so we may rely on all of you to write letters or make comments to the board saying that if they're going to get their permit, then they ought to be promising to fix our building, because it's our last chance. Because they'll be building right up against the wall where it's sunk. So just wanted to let you know, because that's coming up.
We can support you on that, for sure.
Thank you.
And leading into Terry, one of the artists Terry may be talking about today is Bruce Harris, who laid the wooden floor that is at risk now because of the falling of the wall.
Okay, you want to introduce Terry?
Yes, I'd very much like to introduce Terry and Paula. They're hiding up on the stairs.
I do want to mention that who they had originally, that he's employed to, this is in regards to what's happening to the historic building, basically, which is the Carmel Art Association building, that they had offered to go ahead and jack it up those 2 inches and secure it before they started working on the cement foundation for the new project that's been approved, right?
They offered to do that 3 years ago, and then the person that offered it left the firm, left Esperanza, and the new person doesn't want to talk about it. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce Terry and Paula Trotter, who are the owners of all of this wonderful work and have done so much to preserve so many things that would have been lost in reality or dispersed to the point no one even knew they existed. How long have you been doing this?
Well, we started our business in 1980, but as far as Terry's dream and passion to create a museum gallery of 40 plus years of finding ephemera and collecting and storing things, he came to the realization that it needs to come out of boxes and shelves. And so if you can imagine 301 and 303 being totally empty, Terry came in and created from ceiling to floor what we have today. And it's an amazing draw for Pacific Grove. It's our mission statement to preserve history so it has a future. We have 2 locations. I'm in Carmel, and I do get my share of tourists that have no clue. And so my first words to them are just what I said to you. These are historic pieces by infamous artists. And I said, have you ever heard of Stanford University? And of course, you know, that is one of the hooks I use, and then I talk about Pedro de Lemos, the first director of the Stanford Art Gallery, and so forth. And I try and find ways to get them interested, and yeah, they're very appreciative. Now, when people walk in here, they don't just walk in and walk out. So Terry said he had about 45 or 50 people in here yesterday, and I'm in Carmel with a mom and 2 children. So it's a big difference. Not every day. I get my share, but yesterday, for some reason, he got a lot of visitors. But anyway, welcome, and it's an eye-opener for us, the hard work you do and your dedication, and we support it from afar, and we're doing our part.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. To add into what Paula was saying, and you're doing this as well by, you're preserving history so that it has a future, but you're by informing the present, and then that's what this group is all about. And you're making that, you're making a statement, publicly with your within your mission to preserve history and in different areas, and buildings and such. So you're all to be commended. Had a real passion for this. I'm looking at Kent over there, the great art historian. He's well represented in here. We've talked in here together about McComas and his times and such. But an art and architectural historian and trying to preserve. I mean, from your, I'm just throwing some kudos to Kent because of his background with the California Historical Society early on, knowing the early major players, so to speak, in the museum world, and preserving the records and the artwork and such, and exhibitions at the Monterey Museum of Art. We have on display the Monterey The Artist's View exhibition that you curated back in the 80s. And anyway, and you continue to do that. You're ageless. He's, I say, the last link of the Monterey Peninsula Bohemian that we have. And you're in progress. Obviously, too, sure.
He was a Preservationist of the Year also. And Neil, I think we designed the award for you.
I
You're
was
the
the
very
first,
first,
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Because he worked so hard on the Hotel Del Monte that we thought we have to have an award. So this is how you got here, Raymond.
So just I'll give a little background of why this came to be. The motivating factor was, and I saw it through, my folks had an antiques business for 50 years in the area here. They started collecting when I was 8 years old, and Dad was collecting coins. We lived in England for 4.5 years, and I learned a lot about geography, about the earlier generations. Mom started collecting everything else, but the idea, this was back in 1958, we moved over there for 4.5 years, but with the idea of going into the antiques business, which they did in '65 when we moved here. And as time went on, the era of the real collectors, the people that were into preserving the artifacts, the furnishings of the early generations, were becoming fewer and farther. They were basically dying off, unfortunately. And the understanding, those that were passionate in so many different areas of what the early generations created. The younger generations were not really interested. They were interested in minimalism and not having to muse over anything. That the museums are about musing into the past and also being responsible to the present as well. But to have something in the cabinet they had to explain about the younger generations, they don't want to basically look uneducated, as to what that piece is that they're asked by a visitor. So there's a lot of reasons for that. My folks saw it happening. I saw people in our business within the historic art field. One of the gentlemen, Bill Cargus, known him for a long time. We did exhibitions together down in Los Angeles, especially with other art dealers. And he was in his booth with a young lady, and they were looking at paintings for a while. And then a little while later, he came over to our booth because I could see what was going on. And I said, I saw that young lady, and she was very interested. He says, well, Terry, she thought the paintings were nice and colorful and such, but she says, and that was his granddaughter. And she turned and said, well, Grandpa, why should I be interested in anything that ever happened before I was born? She says, I'm not, my friends are. So motivating factor was as basic as life actually happened before the younger generations were alive, needed to be expressed to the younger generations. Okay, so that was the motivating factor to set this up, and I was going to do it much more extensively, but I settled on, or we did, with the artists and the authors and the development of the area and the earlier cultures being expressed with what we've collected, and just a minuscule fraction of the history of this area that is so rich to us all.
It's a good start.
To do a little bit about that, yeah. And so that's what we can do. And then share this as an open and free experience. And we're not a nonprofit, we self-funded, and just keep that alive to people just happen to walk in, like a lot of them did yesterday, but also have other groups in as well, and just provide a space. So that's about it, I guess, about how this came to be here with this project. Paula's been very supportive of that, and we're still collecting in depth in certain areas, and we'll hopefully continue to be for a while. So I was going to actually walk down over this way and set up. And if you have time to walk around or have, but there's the different areas we're happy to be available to talk, in addition or whatever, with something you might find interesting or something you might certainly be able to add with what we have that we're not aware of. And we've had museum docent tours from not only the Monterey Museum of Art, but the Kansas and others. We had the Los Angeles Art Association up here about a month ago for a visit. It's especially when I have docents over, I said, you guys are all fact checkers, so please feel free. It's an open discussion. And I was going to talk a little bit about starting off with John Steinbeck here, and then kind of shift towards Willis Polk and his lifelong friendship after they met with Francis McComas. With that, I think I'll move over here. We do have Bruce Harris represented over here, but I may not have a chance to get further right now. So I took this over to Modern History and Art Association, Casa Serrano. Was it just 2 weeks ago? I think it was today, something like that. We gave a talk, Paul and I did, on the artists represented in the their artwork in the Sala Grande, the main room, and I brought this over and I read many portions of what John Steinbeck wrote in the centennial issue of 1946. This is July 3rd, and about Monterey history and the need for preservation of the history. So I'm going to focus on, I think, if we have some time, again, bear with me, I'm going to read this, some of the paragraphs that relate to the history, the rich history here. So it's the front page, full page that John Steinbeck was asked to write for the Herald, and also a third of the backside as well. And so this is the Monterey we love, by John Steinbeck. There is a tendency among many American towns to make museums of themselves and to celebrate an illustrious past that they never had. There is a love, particularly among the latecomers to California, to glorify, to romanticize, to historicalize the communities with fiestas and pageants which would have filled the old settlers with amazement. Thus, a town which 70 years ago, again, this is 1946, ago was a blacksmith shop and a salt flat will pretend that roses and guitars and fringed hats and pasodobles were all over the place. Committees are formed to perpetuate an architecture that was at its best an accident. It is to be hoped that Monterey will continue to resist this evil process. Nobody built Monterey, it just happened. Its houses were of mud because it was cheaper than planks, and there were no planing mills. People still living can remember when Alvarado Street was a gulch which had planks across it to walk on. Robert Louis Stevenson says of Monterey, and this is kind of a long quote, so bear with me, it also ties into other exhibits that we have here ongoing. The town, this is Robert Louis Stevenson's quote, the town where I was there was a place of 2 or 3 streets economically paved with sea sand and 2 or 3 lanes which were water courses in the rainy season, and at all times were rent up with fissures 4 or 5 feet deep. There were no street lights. Short sections of wooden sidewalk only added to the dangers of the night, for they were often high above the level of the roadway, and one could not tell when they were likely to begin or end. The houses were, for the most part, built of unbaked adobe brick, many of them old, for so new a country. Some of very elegant proportions, with low, spacious, shapely rooms and walls so thick that the heat of summer never dried them to the heart. At the approach of the rainy season, a deathly chill and a graveyard smell began to hang about the lower floors, and diseases of the chest were common and fatal among housekeeping people of either sex. Of course, he had lung problems himself all his life. There was no activity but in and around the saloons, where people sat almost all day long playing cards. This writer can remember the glorious old time, 4th of July celebration. The parade was always scheduled for 11 o'clock and so advertised. Now this is Steinbeck, right? The people from Salinas and Watsonville gathered, and promptly at 11, the troops from the Presidio went by. Poor devils, they were under orders. They had to be there. But the fraternal organizations, the floats, the ununiformed clubs, some got there an hour or so late, and some never arrived. But it was said that to be Grand Marshal of the parade added 25 years to a man's life and left him gray and broken ever afterward. So this is the Monterey we love. It can't be pushed into a shape. It can't be marshaled in a parade. At least it is to be hoped that it can't. It takes its own pace, and committees of architecture, of public entertainment will go crazy trying to regiment it. Then he goes on further. Further down, he says, laws promulgated. And these are excerpts of what Steinbeck's writing. Monterey, with its oldest history of any community on the coast of California, is fortunate in having several organizations, as well as countless private citizens, pledged to programs for the beautification of the city and the preservation or restoration of historical monuments. Definite programs aimed at that goal have been worked out and are now part of the laws of the city. An organization has been incorporated and pledged to purchase any historical adobe or property threatened with destruction. As we were talking about earlier. But the work has been slow, even though the goal is in sight. Earliest preservation of the historical heritage of Monterey was based on necessity. A good portion of the families of the town lived in homes which now have a tremendous value historically. Buildings were kept up and maintained just because they were homes, and many of those homes have been saved. So it goes on quite a bit further, but just to suffice that it was, it was being recognized, and this is just after World War II had ended, and the importance of, again, so adequately relayed by Steinbeck in his particular book. I have other issues of the centennial editions that are devoted to slow section and others, so to get those out.
Should we go over and are you going to talk about Steinbeck here?
I could talk a little bit about Steinbeck. I was thinking about Willis Polk and Francis McComas.
All right.
And so we have a painting here, actual watercolor of Mount Tamalpais. I believe it's Corte Madera Creek with the pueblos and blossom. And surround. And so when, just a little bit about McComas, he came to, he was born in Tasmania. You probably, many of you, I'm sure you know the history of McComas, Francis McComas. He fell in love with this area when he was in Tasmania, then studied art. He was gifted at an early age. He studied and started exhibiting also in Australia. Then he realized to actually make it as an artist, you needed to be on the coast of California, specifically San Francisco, where the patrons were. And he heard about the beauty of Monterey as well. So he, and Ken and I sat in here and given a talk when the McComas exhibition was being held at the Monterey Museum of Art. It was a fun time to relay that. Fast forward, yeah, when he came down, he became one of the devotees of Monterey, they called him, and he loved this area. Eventually he came down here and is buried here, was great friends with S.F.B. Morris and so many others in his time, but he exhibited internationally. So he was actually world famous during his time. The marriage with, when I think I mentioned, so he, when in 1905, he married Louise Parrott, the daughter of one of the wealthiest families in California, and banking and mining interests and such. So that opened the doors for McComas. At the wedding, Willis Polk was best man. Charles Rolla Peters was one of the many ushers in this very elaborate wedding that made the front page of the, I think it was the San Francisco Examiner, the Chronicle, whatever. It was a big deal. Marriage didn't work out. A few years later, he was actually escorting, always seen with down here. He became part of the Cypress art. He was in with the writers like George Sterling and such, and he loved being in the company of Peters and others, so did Willis Polk after as time went on. So that's a great association. It ties into so many others that we have represented in here as well. Other works by McComas and his background. Ken Seavey wrote the first monograph that I'm aware of on, well, Joseph Barry did early on in 1937, but then a few years later, at the California Historical Society, mounted an exhibition with a catalog on McComas. And now I thought I would just do another read, fairly short read hopefully, and honoring two people of Irish heritage, one born in Ireland, came to the United States, and another was Mayo Hayes O'Donnell, who was of Irish extraction, this being St. Patrick's Day. So. This should just take a few minutes. So again, I'll do it. This was in 1953. The Peninsula Diary, recorded and published by Mayo Hayes O'Donnell. This is more about the Merienda to begin with. In the mantle of old tradition, in the rime of vanished day, the shrouded and silent city sits by her crescent bay. Homage to Monterey Bay. Such words were written by the late Daniel O'Connell as he described Monterey in the early days, when he was numbered among the early settlers. Today, the poet's great-granddaughter, Miss Diana Davison, enjoys the privilege of reading those first four lines of the longer poem written by Daniel O'Connor as it is carved into the stone monument in front of Colton Hall in Monterey, which I believe Willis Polk with Bruce Porter was possibly responsible for, I believe.
Correct.
A city which he describes as solemn city of dreams. Next, Wednesday, June 3rd, Miss Davison, again this is written in 1953, Miss Davison will have the honor of acting as an attendant to La Favorita Favorita at the Monterey History and Art Association's annual Merienda in Memory Garden in celebration of the city's 183rd birthday. A better choice for the honor could not have been found, for Miss Davison's maternal and paternal grandparents had made a name for themselves in California history long before she was born. Her maternal grandparents were the late Mr. and Mrs. Moran of Monterey. Her grandmother was the author of a number of books, and her mother was the illustrator for Trail of the Little Pipe, Mrs. Moran's last writing before her death. Daniel O'Connell was born in Ireland. He came from a distinguished family. His father was a noted lawyer, and his granduncle was the famous patriot and statesman, Daniel O'Connell, known to history as the Irish Liberator. He came to San Francisco in 1870, took up journalism, and by his talent and versatile pen soon attracted favorable comment. He was known as a journalist, a dramatist, novelist, and a gifted poet, one of the many brilliant men and women of that era who in prose and verse pictured the glamour of the Golden State, and in particular Monterey, where the scenes of several of his poems are laid. In 1874, Daniel O'Connell married a Monterey girl, Miss Anita Ashley, and after much of his life was spent in and about the old capital. He was a man of fine presence, gentle, sunny, a lovable nature, a melodious voice, a fund of keen Irish humor, and as one writer describes him, he had many friends and no enemies. During Daniel O'Connell's lifetime, a volume of his poems was published under the title of Lyrics. After his death in 1899, another book of his poems, collected by his daughter and edited by Ina Coolbrith, the Poet Laureate of California, was published in 1900 by Robinson's with the title Songs of Bohemia. O'Connell, with his interesting family, made his home in Sausalito in 1899. While on a visit to his beloved Monterey, he contracted a severe cold, from which he never recovered. He passed away February 23rd that year. Daniel O'Connell was one of the originators of the band organizer of the Bohemian Club of San Francisco. He gave it its name, and during his membership had been perhaps the most gifted of all of all its contributors to entertainment, according to the tribute in the club's annuals written by Clay Green. After his death, his friends caused his memory to be commemorated by such monuments as he himself may have chosen. On one of the terraced drives high above San Francisco Bay in Sausalito, his friends erected an enduring stone resting seat which bears his name. Afterward, a tree was dedicated to him in Bohemian Grove, and later the inspiration of Charles Rollo Peters. Two such dedications were held in and near Monterey. Peters, the master painter of the night, and he had many other titles as well, well earned, as he was appropriately called because of his glorious nocturnes, sent out invitations to several Bohemians and other friends to assemble at his residence for the purpose of dedicating a tree to the memory of the gone but not forgotten Bohemian. A large oak tree was so dedicated, and it still stands in Peters Gate near the home of Miss Judy Todd. Also, it's not in here, but also Willis Polk with others erected the stones that you see off of Munders going in towards Alameda Street into the Peters property. The same group who dedicated the Monterey tree were later invited to attend the dedication of a redwood tree, followed by a barbecue in a canyon on San Francisco Rancho. The owners, Mr. Richard Ross and Bradley Sargent. Among those who attended were D.W. Delmas, one of the state's most prominent attorneys, Clay Green, Charles Rollo Peters, Charles Dickman, Francis McComas, all noted artists, George Sterling, the writer, Willis Polk, the noted architect, and Frank Powers, one of the developers of Carmel, and Charles Warren Stoddard, the author. So thanks for bearing with me. It was a great read. I just wanted to share that and give a tribute to the Irish. But also it ties in so well with the background of the long friendship with Willis Polk and Peters as well, and of course Francis McComas. So, all these, as we've talked about, these lives intersect in so many ways that it's fascinating. They've lived such rich lives, affected so many people. Sometimes not just as artists, but as they could play instruments, they could perform in plays. I mean, Jo Mora comes to mind. There's so many others that were so multi-talented and had a sense of fellowship and camaraderie, both men and women, and a wonderful time. So, thank you.
Thank you.
May I add to that the monument that has the verse by O'Connell did stand in front of Colton Hall. It was designed and built by Willis Polk, by the committee that included Francis McComas to create the monument.
Right.
And in addition to O'Connell and Polk, on that monument are a couple of pumas designed by Arthur Putnam, who did the gargoyles by the front door. So more ties. Because sensitive people thought that the monument distracted from Colton Hall when you took pictures of Colton Hall, the monument was moved to Friendly Plaza.
Okay.
And it is still there near Colton Hall, but not right in front of Colton Hall
I saw
anymore.
the original photographs of it in front of Colton Hall,
Yeah.
and I go, that's not there, is it? Yeah, so, thank you. And also Willis Polk, he, let's see, he, along with Bruce Porter, erected the monument in San Francisco dedicated to Robert Louis Stevenson, that they both designed the plaque as well. And this is with the great sailing ship of
And
Treasure
that's
Island.
become controversial.
Oh, is that right?
Well, because I don't know if Neil knows about this, but the city wants to restore Portsmouth Square, which is like the heart of Chinatown. And all the memorials are like to Robert Louis Stevenson and people like that, that don't really fit.
I see.
And they're trying to figure out what to do. It's not that it's
Yeah,
controversial because it's Stevenson, but
right,
they want to recognize the Chinese community,
sure.
and they have all these other memorials there. I haven't seen it. This is just very recent.
Okay, well, that'd be really something if it could come down here.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, yeah. So,
And also, I was going to mention so Willis Polk also designed Fanny Stevenson's home on Hyde Street in San Francisco with a great view and such a very large mansion. And then Willis Polk also he designed, personally oversaw the design of a large stained glass window dedicated to the ship in Treasure Island. I can't remember the name of the boat itself, the ship that was sailed on, but with that as homage to Stevenson for Fanny. And so he, along with Fanny's input, obviously, so he had a role to play there as well. This actually, the watercolor descended in a family that I believe it was that were personal friends of and ended up purchasing Willis Polk's home up in San Francisco. And I did a whole deep dive into the history because we knew the last owners from an estate that it came to an auction house, and I was offered it directly. And so, anyway, so it's interesting when you see the background stories to some of the artwork and privy to that, so that the lineage. So, already, I think that's.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you all have a lot to enjoy here, and Terry will be here to answer questions. Why don't you point out where things are, because that has Steinbeck over
Yes.
there.
This is dedicated to Steinbeck and Ricketts and the artists and writers, friends of theirs. A lot of original material and items in there. Right, to start off with, here is there's a cabinet right here. Well, first of all, there's this section right here that is dedicated to some of the writers of the area. Robert Louis Stevenson with Fanny's cookbook that she took with her on all their travels. rotations, and I have some items photographed from inside, and also some original items that were tucked into it. But it's great recipes in there, and this is dedicated to Robinson Jeffers, with What's Doing Here, one of the copies with Bruce Harris on the cover. So I've got Bruce Harris in, and this is dedicated to just had one of those moments, Gertrude Stein, and her family album, original photographs and cabinet cards and such, and a whole display here with her watch that was given to her by her brother Leo before he left for Europe for several months with her cousin Fred, and he had engraved to Gertrude Stein, June 5th, 1895, when she was attending Amherst for those couple of years, and he had enameled forget-me-nots on the covers. But then it kind of leads into, because to Steinbeck and Brickett's, his grandpa right here is actually his personal copy of his high school yearbook from 1919, El Gavilan, from when he graduated from Salinas Union High School. And the important part here was it was the first time ever being published with original content in there. He wrote 3 essays, rather significant essays that shows him what his future might hold for him. 10 years later, he wrote his first novel, The Cup of Gold. But prior to that, by age 14, he really wanted to be a writer and was writing critical essays and such, and delving into creative writing, staying up late at night. But he knew that's what he wanted to be, but his first time actually ever to print is in this statement there. He was also senior class president. So there's a lot more in there that's kind of going to be talked about.
You left out the walking stick.
Walking stick, his grandfather's Blackthorn walking stick was another acquisition. And
Isn't that his typewriter?
yes, the typewriter was collected from the little writing room, outside Grandma's cottage. It was still on the desk when the Heidebrecks were there. Jim has passed away, and Carol Heidebreck, I think she's just recently passed away. They had a museum bookstore there. They were great friends with Elaine Steinbeck and such, and other family members. So I was able to acquire. They kept everything after they closed, operated for 10 years during the 1990s. They happened to live in Pacific Grove. It was just a chance meeting, and over a period of years, I was able to acquire much of their original items, as well as from Virginia St. James and here in the Steinbeck Cottage on 11th, the great niece of Steinbeck, and part of the desk from her, one of the exterior doors, and some other items. So the first section, I believe, I may have mentioned, I'm not sure, that's devoted to the earlier cultures of this area with historical photographs in many cases which have been enlarged, but with original paintings of both the Chinese fishing village here in Pacific Grove, and but also of Los Angeles Chinatown, as well as the San Francisco Chinatown painting from 1897 there, Ross Alley depicted New Year's celebration with fireworks in the sky. But it also covers from the earliest artwork, so from 1841, showing a full depiction of one of the Drumson tribes of one of the Ohlone Indians set in the mission fields area, from the mission area. In 1841, the HMS Kurakawa, a ship of the British Royal Navy, came into Monterey Bay briefly. Talked to Tim Thomas about this. I had to have done a deep dive, but he was able to confirm. Actually, what I hadn't found out was it was Mr. Ailing did the depiction. He kept a log. I purchased one page out of the log, the only page that had when he was in a depiction of this indigenous Indian in full accoutrements and mission Indian, and so he was the assistant surgeon, and that's why it's so anatomically correct when you see his skeletal structure so well portrayed. So, and then Tim Thomas is a great historian as well, and has shared his input in so many levels with so many different groups over the years, and on a regular basis with the Monterey. Every third Thursday of the month, I think he's still doing it, where the magical history tour, I think he calls it. So anyway, so that's the first section from the Spanish colonial era through the Mexican era through the American presence in 1846 on, Japanese presence in the area. Then we have Nokomis and along with Sam Colburn represented as early modernists. They both loved golf and they had a lot in common because they were early modernists in their own right. And so actually Sam Colburn exhibited nationally but not internationally, whereas Nokomis is international. This section is devoted to a deep dive into wonderful original items owned and created by Pedro de Lemos. Again, we collected photography, we represented the estates, we're still acquiring from certain families, so it's, or other items that do come available, like the walking stick, the Hamilton's walking stick, it's my brother's, Sam Hamilton's. And then, so we kind of work around the office area with some art in there. Then also some wonderful paintings of the early Monterey, primarily Monterey structures, buildings, and also the San Carlos Cathedral by William Adam, actually, Sid wrote that to me. Then we also two national academicians, William Ritchell as well as Arnold Hansen, very prominent people, international invitations, both of them. I do have laid out on, there's a cabinet just below the large William Ritchell Wildcat Code. It's a 1910 ledger, the hotel lobby ledger that was signed into by so many people. Feel free to kind of gently go through it. There's some really amazing people that are that signed in during the, it was actually a fairly good time period because it was several of the artists as well, but many others, including Mr. Booth, primary residence was up in San Francisco, but he was down here often. Francis McComb signed in regularly. It's 1910, but it was the summer months into the first week of July, spring into excuse me, the first week of August. Then upstairs, there's so much more represented, especially with Jo Mora and his life and legacy, and Mary Dino Morgan. Anyway, feel free to wander around, and if we can, be of help, we're available.